Hi, welcome to Fish on Fridays. I'm Al McCauley, and I'm filming this particular episode toward the end of October. And so I thought it would be a good time to talk about a secular holiday that we have in the United States. It's very popular, that's really rooted almost entirely in Christianity. And that, of course, is Halloween. Now, we don't often think of Halloween as a Christian holiday, but it is rooted in the celebration of two particular Christian feasts. That would be All Saints' Day on November 1st and All Souls' Day on November 2nd. Even the word Halloween tells us that. It's All Hallows' Eve. Halloween is a contraction for those three words. So we're remembering these holy days, the evening before these holy days that we're going to celebrate in the Catholic Church. Now let's look back at the history of this a little bit. In the first several centuries of Christianity, we know that the Roman Empire persecuted mercilessly Christianity. Whole communities were wiped out, were oppressed. And so we came to know a lot of the great heroes, virtuous, brave martyrs who died for their faith. And we remember them in litanies of the saints, and we remember them in Eucharistic prayers. People like Perpetua and Felicity. We remember people like Ignatius of Antioch and countless others. But there were a lot of people, the church recognized that there were a lot of people whose names we didn't know, that so many men and women showed heroic virtue by going to their deaths as martyrs of the faith. And as a way to remember them, the church wanted to establish a feast day so we can remember those brave men and women. And that's what we celebrate on All Saints' Day. All Souls' Day is to remember the souls of those people who have passed in the past year or in the recent past, and remember them as well. So these became very, very big feast days in the early church. And initially they were celebrated in the spring of the year. It was right around the year 800 when the Pope decided to move them to November 1st and November 2nd, respectively. And he did that for a lot of reasons, not least of which it coincided with many cultures' celebration of the summer's end. In particular, places like what we call the United Kingdom today and Northern Europe, these pagans celebrated a festival called Samhain. And that's what it meant, summer's end. And it was a way to celebrate the agricultural year, all the blessings that they had gotten from the earth, and as a way to prepare them for the death that winter inevitably brings. And so it was a very big celebration, many days. And the church wanted to assimilate those pagan folks into Christianity. Now, a lot of people will criticize the church and say, well, they just celebrated this feast day and took over a pagan feast day. And I would say, I think that's nothing short of genius. It's a way to blend those cultures together, to have them see that ultimately what they're celebrating is fulfilled in Christianity, in Christ. And so the idea of celebrating this harvest festival, this summer's end, really made sense to coincide with these two important days on the Christian calendar. And so we remember these people, these brave men and women who have gone before us, the people who are recently departed, we remember them on these 2 days. Now, how does this come down to us as Halloween beyond the date? Well, one of the things that was very, very typical of Samhain was people would make these little things called soul cakes. They called them soul cakes. They were very simply, bread, a little bit of sugar maybe, but it wasn't much because they didn't have much. But they would make these cakes and they would put them out outside of their front door. And people, poor people, were encouraged to come and take them, and they were fed by those cakes. And in return, when they took the cake, they promised to pray for the souls of those people who had recently died from that family. And so it was a double benefit. What was happening is the poor people were being fed, and the prayers for the faithfully departed were being said as well. And so this putting soul cakes out on the front porch, if you will, that comes down to us today as trick-or-treating. That's why we give out candy on Halloween. And just as an aside, I have a few examples here. I got a little Snickers bar here. I don't know if you can see that. It says fun size. And then, M&M's, peanut M&M's, my absolute favorite candy of all time. And it says right there, fun size. Now, I think this is false advertising because, quite frankly, if this was fun size, it would be like a pound bag. This is like a bite size at best, but I digress. But that's where we get our trick-or-treating from, that idea of the soul cakes and asking for prayers of the faithfully departed. So the celebration of Halloween is rooted in something that Catholic Church calls the communion of saints. And that's the idea that we are all connected to each other, the living and the dead, those in heaven and purgatory and those on earth, those souls on earth. And we pray for each other. We are part of a family, if you will. And so that's the whole gist of All Saints' Day and All Souls' Day. Now, as years went on, Halloween took a little bit more macabre or morbid turn, and so people started focusing on the spirits of dead people, and so that's where we get the idea of ghosts. And in the Celtic world, they were called will-o'-the-wisps, and they were these things that would float around in the woods and in the wilderness, and they were scary because they were part of the unknown. But the idea of the spirit world and connecting Halloween to ghosts, that's where it all comes from, is this celebration of those people who have gone before us and part of our connection to the communion of saints. And again, because we are celebrating on November 2nd, All Souls Day, those people who have gone before us and who have passed away, it's not a stretch to understand why you also see at Halloween skeletons, images of skulls, because it reminds us of our own death, our own mortality. And that's not a bad thing, to be reminded that we are not permanent physically on this earth. We're meant to be alive with Christ. Our spirit, our souls are alive with Christ, not just now, but in the next world, in heaven. And so to be reminded of that is not a bad idea, because it can help us to take stock of where we're at and see where we are in terms of our own conscience, our own morality, our own sinfulness, and the desire for mercy that we really need. And so seeing skeletons and skulls at Halloween can be a reminder to Christianity, to all Christians, of our mortality and our utter dependence and reliance on God for forgiveness, and so that we don't suffer a worse fate in the afterworld. Perhaps at Halloween you carve pumpkins into jack-o'-lanterns, and even that has a story that's rooted in Christianity. It's a fable, a legend about a man named Jack, a young man named Jack, who was smart enough to outwit the devil and not land in hell when he died, but he was not good enough in this earth, in this world, his physical life, to ascend to heaven. And so he was kind of floating in this state of limbo of sorts between the two realms, and he was meant to do that for eternity. And so he carved a turnip, because that's what they looked at jack-o'-lanterns in the old world in Europe as turnips. When immigrants came to this country, pumpkins were plentiful, and so the turnip kind of morphed into cutting a pumpkin, which, by the way, is why we wear orange and have orange out for Halloween, because it matches the color of pumpkins. But anyway, this Jack was meant to roam in the netherworld, if you will, with a turnip, and he had a candle inside of it, and his goal was to try to remind people to live their lives with the light of Christ in them, so that they wouldn't get the same fate that he is really bound to this nothingness. And so jack-o'-lanterns are a reminder for us to seek reconciliation with others and with our God. It's a reminder for us to live with the light of Christ in us. That's why we put candles inside. It looks neat with the carved faces, and it illuminates and all that, but it's really a reminder for us to scoop out the bad stuff, get rid of it, put in the light of Christ in its place, and shine for other people. That's what it means to be a Christian. And so jack-o'-lanterns are a great reminder of our Christian faith as you celebrate Halloween. The last thing I want to say about Halloween is you often see images of things like mummies and witches and even devils and things of that nature. And it's because of that, a lot of Christians will stay away from, they'll poo-poo Halloween. They'll be afraid of it. They don't want to seemingly endorse something that is like of the occult. Things that promise some kind of insight equal to or greater than God. The idea of living after death and all that kind of stuff. The vampires, living on blood. All of those things should serve as a reminder to us that God is greater than everything. That God is the creator of angels and fallen angels, of demons, of everything. And so God's power is greater. God's insight, God's love, God's mercy, ultimately, are greater than any of those forces that we can try to conjure on this earth. And so while they're scary, we should not fear them. And so when I look at things in Halloween and I see the celebration and I see things like witches and mummies and vampires, to me, they remind me of God's power and God's love for us ultimately that is far greater than anything that could scare us or that should scare us. So I would suggest if you have plans to have a party on Halloween, to bob for apples, to trick-or-treating, do it with gusto, knowing full well that this holiday is absolutely steeped in Christian tradition. And it's not a bad thing to reclaim that, to understand that once again, here is a way that our great Catholic faith undergirds and supports so much of what we do in our secular lives in the United States. Thanks for watching. If you think someone might be interested in this content, please feel free to share it. It'd be great if you would subscribe to our YouTube channel or follow us on Facebook. Hope you will continue to tune in on Fridays for more Fish on Fridays. And until next time, be good to each other, and God bless.